We had somebody come into the youth group with a machete. As you know, they're not very pleasant items to have around you, and it's quite scary, and the lads were all terrified. This young man said, "Don't worry, Daphne, I'll handle this. No matter how dangerous it is, I see God working so hard in difficult situations. You don't have to look far to see God at work, to just see what God is up to and join in."
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbert with Inspired. Great to be back for another fantastic week of encouragement, inspiration, and challenge. If you're new to us, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us, we just had enough of being relentlessly bombarded in the 24/7 news cycle by stuff that makes you fearful and anxious and depressed and cynical. And what we need is to hear good news that stirs our faith, that raises our spirits. And I got no doubt this week you're going to be super encouraged and challenged because we got with us the wonderful Daphne Clifton. Hello, Daphne.
Good morning. Hi, Simon. Good to be with you.
It's so good to have you. Brilliant. Well, listen, by means of introduction, because in this email that you wrote to me last year, it says a bit about yourself. So I'm just going to read out what you wrote, and this is what you sent to me. Simon, my reason for contacting you is, I hope not too weird. I enjoy listening to the Inspired podcast and have passed them on to numerous friends who also enjoy them. Whilst I enjoy them, invariably I finish listening with a real sense of inadequacy. When I tell my friends that, they laugh and say, "Well, if you feel inadequate, imagine how we feel." What I mean is that I haven't set up a multinational charity or business. I don't have a beautiful husband who stands beside me in my endeavors in the perfect family scenario. And I'm not famous for anything, infamous maybe. I do my thing in my small corner of the world as a business coach, single parent, an ex-senior vice president of sales, a trustee for a small charity, and a self-supporting minister in the jolly old Church of England. Most recently, I've swapped hockey clubs and find myself being asked about God as the whistle is about to start the game. The ride of a life with God is exhilarating. So seeing God in the small things is hugely important to me, and I know encourages others when we reflect and chat about it. I wonder if having some not famous people on your podcast might be a possibility and even a wider encouragement. So you wrote that to me, Daphne, last year, and it coincided with another person writing in something similar. And listen, guys, apologies to anyone if these podcasts make you feel inadequate. That is not the intention, but I get what you're saying, and so, well, I mean, you've listed a whole load of things that you do that are very cool, but you wanted to offer an alternative for someone. Well, clearly you talk about being a single parent and not having the perfect husband there to stand at your side and that sort of thing. So there have been challenges in the mix, and hopefully as we explore that today, we will all be encouraged and edified in a different way. But every podcast is different. Everyone's story is different. Right, enough of me. I'm so excited to have you, Daphne. And let's just mention where we were at a funeral of the great Richard Garnett last year as well. And what did you remember about that?
Well, apart from the fact that we all were given a bottle of champagne as we left, that was one of the good parts, was that in the talk, Richard used to say, "You can't outgive God." And that hangs and stays with me, because whatever we do and however great we think we are, we cannot outgive God. And I worked with Richard a couple of times, and we used to go on retreat. We were both coaches in our own way. And his, languid, and his real relaxedness with God was stunning. And I think that came across in the funeral as well.
Yeah, it was wonderful. There were 300 of us. I checked the price of the bottles of champagne. It was £100 a bottle. So it was a 30 grand gift he made at his funeral. And I say that just because his life was about generosity. He gave of his time. He trained me for free in public speaking, as he did hundreds of people. And what he would have loved was at the wake, if you like, in the pub afterwards, I got chatting to a bloke who had listened to his podcast. His podcast remains the most listened to, and we'll put it in the chat just because it's so helpful. You cannot outgive God. And I got chatting to a guy who ended up joining me in Burundi, and I'll keep his name out of it, but he ended up making a 65 grand donation to the work of Glow. He and his wife both came out, and they're now very good friends. And so we chuckled of the Garnet factor of kingdom networking, and that's another connection we've got here in this podcast now. So anyway, let's move on to your life now. So don't know much about your background. You started off in a rural West Country setting. It's very different from your London life now. Give us an idea of influences of your early life.
Yeah, I will do. I was in a lovely little church down in Devon, near Plymouth. And my Sunday school teacher was Mrs. Clark. And she was Welsh. And every week we used to sing, and we'd sing the songs that we've all sung. And by the time I was 12, she had me being a Sunday school teacher. And she used to teach us. And her husband, Mr. Clark, was my French teacher at school. And so really early in life, I saw people who were Christians who didn't just do it on a Sunday. They were Christians all week. Mr. Clark was always the same. He was greatly respected at church, and he was greatly respected at work. And he was a really good French teacher. So I saw people doing normal stuff for God, and they were superb. And then the vicar at the time, sadly, it was in the days when if you had a heart attack, you died and that was it. He died quite young, Mr. Leggett. But his wife, Mrs. Leggett, they had 5 children, and she was an inspiration to me for the 99 years that she lived, or however long she lived. She was in my prayer team. She was such an inspiration, and he was too. They gave me, the 4 of them, and Christopher Goodwin's the next vicar, always gave me a sense of God. It came out of them. The Holy Spirit was present. And my father was the church warden, so I learned to clean gutters and open doors and do all the things that you do as a church warden's daughter, and ringing bells. And I just sort of did God, I think, in those days. And I remember, when I was going to be confirmed, Christopher Goodwin said, right, you're all going to go out in pairs and speak to other Christians and ask them about their faith. I was like, oh, mate, I'm just not ready for this. We had to go and speak to people about their faith. And do you know, it was one of the best things we were ever made to do as teenagers, because listening to other people's stories, it just resonated. It was lovely. And those influences in my early life, I'm still in touch with Mr. and Mrs. Clark, who are much older now, but still solid Christians who show an interest. It's just amazing.
Wonderful. Did you stay on the straight and narrow all the way?
Sadly not. No, I didn't. I had about 15 years or so where I didn't actively turn my back on God, but there were other forces pulling at me. We all know about the spiritual battles that are around, and I wasn't quite as cognizant in those days. And I had about 15 years away, and I physically moved away from Plymouth, and I'd spent some time in the Wrens, actually. But I went away. I won't go into the boring, gory details, but no matter how far I went, God was waiting. It was often you don't see life until you look back, do you? And I remember once I was at the end of a really difficult marriage. I had a gorgeous son who was about a year old. I'd had 12 weeks off work because in those days there were no statutory rights for people. So I was the sales director of a small company, and I'd gone back full time. And I saw this great big billboard in the road near me, and it said creche available outside the local church. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a plan. Wheeled James into the creche, poor kid. And I just went into church, and I thought, oh, I've come back. Thank you, God. And, I got into the usual. It was a very classic Anglican, go on the rota, do this, that, and the other. And at the same time, I met a woman. She was the mother of a boyfriend at the time, who said to me, Daphne, are you saved? I said, oh, Joyce, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. And I finished with the boyfriend, but Joyce and I became really good friends. And I went to a Pentecostal church down in Folkestone. And one day I heard the pastor say, you're either with God or you're not. And I was like, yep, I'm in. And I came to my adult faith, and Joyce mentored me on the phone, because I used to go to church there on a Saturday and come back to the Anglican church on a Sunday, which was like my comfort zone. And when I look back, I think, praise the Lord for being there, ready and waiting. And you know what happened was, because I was teaching at Sunday school, as my son got older, I was teaching the 5-year-olds. All Mrs. Clark's teaching came rushing back. And all those stories, and, in Joel where it says, the locusts will eat it all up, but God will sort that out. It was like there was some sort of unlocking in my heart and in my head. And everything, it was so amazing to me, having had such a dreadful 15 years, a ridiculous 15 years, to see that people look at photographs of me when I had James and say, is that you? I look younger now than I looked when I was 32. It's bizarre. I know I still only look about 21, but life moves on. So I found a church, and then my dear friend Edna was running Acorn Christian listening courses. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a plan. So we did a Christian listening course. And all of a sudden, there was a whole thing about listening to God, listening to me, listening to the other person. And there was a whole new universe out there that I hadn't experienced before by engaging my listening with God. It was a phenomenal course. So if ever you're offered an Acorn Christian listening course, do it. Because I use it in my coaching now. When I'm coaching, I'll think, oh, God, I'm not sure what to ask. I need a question. And I get a beautiful question that God gives me from my client. And they'll go, I'm not sure about that. And then it's a good question because God just helps us to think. And then, see, that whole listening to God thing, I was commuting at the time. I was commuting up to Camden in North London. So it was about an hour's commute. So I'd read my Bible on the train. That was my quiet time, was the commute. And if you've ever commuted, you kind of get into a routine and you know how long the journey is. And I used to 10-minute walk up the road to the station. And one day my head was going like this. I thought, this is the most peculiar thing. What is going on? Anyway, I looked up and we've got a lovely conservatoire, music halls near us, the Blackheath concert halls. And there was a sign on the side and it said, Destiny Fairs, Sunday, Saturday, next week, 2 weekends time. And all week as I walked up to my work, my head was doing this. And by Friday, this little voice was saying, seriously, Daphne, they're not going to come to church on Sunday. You need to go in there. Okay. Well, there's me going up to be senior vice president of sales and doing my work. So I spoke to my vicar and I said, look, I just think we ought to be in there. I don't quite know why. And can I have your permission to talk to some friends locally? Because I've lived here a while and I'm a bit of an extrovert, you might have noticed. So I know quite a lot of people in a lot of churches. So I got together, 5 or 6 of us from different churches, different traditions. And we had one person who was a vicar who was able to do communion for us. And we used to meet. We met to pray and we met to eat, which is obviously what Christians are meant to do, is eat a lot and pray a lot. Goes beautifully together. Mm-hmm. And we decided that I would phone up and we'd book a stand and we'd go in and we'd be called the People of the Way and we would offer prayer and we would ask people about their spiritual journey because it was all that whole crystals, it was madness in there. Anyway, goes on and we have a lot of prayer around it because there's some really sinister stuff that goes on, that whole tarot thing, that whole past life regression, really dangerous spiritual stuff going on. So we were really, really solid in prayer. And downstairs was all the crystals and selling weird stuff to make you feel better, apparently. And then upstairs was the deep tarot horrible stuff, and we weren't allowed to go up there on our own. We had a rule: we go in pairs wherever we go. See, we're back to going out in pairs again. How that comes back. I learned how to do that when I was young. So we get to the first day and we've got our stand and we're organised and we've got a box that you can put your prayers in and we've got a sign that says, where are you on your spiritual journey? Would you like us to pray with you? Turn up the first morning, there's a bloke standing outside giving out tracts, Christian tracts. And I said, oh, hello, what are you doing here? Oh, he said, I don't know. He said, God sent me here and said, bring 1,000 tracts with you. I said, well, that's a right old result because we haven't got any. You're part of the team now, so you can do 11 till 1. So he was part of the team. So all the time we were doing this, there would be people coming in who were lost. And it was so sad to see so many lost people looking at all sorts of weird stuff. And then if I saw people who I knew were Christians, I'd be like, what are you doing in here? Get out. oh, we thought we'd come and have a look and see what was on offer. I said, go back to your church. That's where Jesus is waiting for you. Don't come in here and fuel all that's going on here. Because we'd been praying that this Destiny Fair would close. So the second year we did it again. And then the last year was the last year that they could do it. They had to close. So they're no longer there anymore. We prayed them out. But the joke was, on the last day, there was a very smart man. He came up in his suit and he was not happy with us being there. He was really not happy. And he said, what are you doing here? Why are you Christians in here? I said, well, we've just come to talk to people about their spiritual life and where they are and to pray with them. And why aren't you charging anything? People didn't understand. We didn't charge for anything. We were the only stall not taking your money. But we had such fun as a group, and we had such joy. And we were able to sit with people. Lots of people wanted to be prayed with. Lots of people wanted to know about Jesus. And the thing I love about God, and I love, is that I have no idea what happened to most of those people, but God does. And it's like the little boy with the loaves and the fishes. He said, I've got this, and left Jesus to do the rest. And there's a real sense for me that through all those Destiny Fairs and that learning that I had about how to pray, how to work with others, God was underpinning the whole thing and continues to underpin it. And it's like at work, I set up a prayer group. I had to ask HR. So I set up a lunchtime prayer group. And you have to be a bit careful when you're senior in the business that you're not abusing your power as a Christian and as a boss. So there were 2 or 3 of us who were Christians, and we all knew we were. And I can sniff a Christian out. I could smell them. I used to pray. If ever you want to meet Christians at work, pray. Just say, God, I want to meet Christians. So I remember a couple of them. And I said, look, we meet for sandwiches once a week. And I remember one day, it always happens in the ladies' loo. Somebody was absolutely bawling her eyes out, really upset. And I said, oh, what's the matter? She had a girlfriend who was young with a family, and she was dying of cancer, and she was in a coma. And I said, look, I don't know how this will work, but I know that God cares for you and your friend. And will you allow me tonight when I go home to pray for her? I didn't know this girl at all. It was a big organisation. And about, I suppose, 6 months later, I saw her on the stairs at work. And I said, oh, how are you? And how's your friend? Oh, she said she died. She said, but you said you'd pray. She woke up that night for 2 hours to say goodbye to her family, and then she died. And she said, and I believe that was an answer to prayer. Oh. I was like, whoa. Praise the Lord.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So we just have to offer what we have, but keep our eyes peeled and our spirits awake and alert to what's going on. So we had another chap who had a brain tumor, and he went to another country to have an operation, and he knew we were praying for him, and he wasn't a Christian. And we told him we were praying for him, and it all went really well. And on my last day in the business, before I went up to set up my coaching business, he came into lunch, and we welcomed him with open arms. And he said, I wanted to come in today to say thank you and to pray to your Jesus. I mean, it wasn't a dry eye in the house, and we sat and he prayed to Jesus, and he'd been brought up in a very different faith setting. And, it's quite something when I'm speechless.
Wonderful. Yep, love these work stories. Any other ones you want to share?
I think there's just one that I would share, because it's about having integrity at work. And one of my favourite Bible stories is Naaman's servant girl. And nobody knows her name. She was trafficked. She was working for the boss's wife. She was her servant. She was probably brushing her hair, doing her face, getting her dressed in the morning. And because of her faith in God, Naaman gets a mention by Jesus hundreds of years later, and we still don't know her name. I cannot wait to meet her. So for my money, these unnamed people, I resonate with them. So having our integrity at work is really, really important. And people often don't know what that means. So one year, there was the usual cash crisis that countries and businesses have. And we were all told that we weren't allowed to have departmental Christmas lunches. And we would only have the company Christmas lunch. And I had a lovely team of 4 managers in the department, and they had a team around them. And we discovered that everyone else was having departmental lunches, except us. And my lovely team came and sat in my office and said, Daphne, we've got a bit of a plan. We think, because we've all got £100 on our business cards, our credit cards, if we all do £100, we can have our own party and no one will know. And again, I was sitting there thinking, oh, Lord, what am I going to say? And I didn't open my mouth, and they looked at me and said, nah, we didn't think you'd like that idea after all. So, sometimes you don't have to say anything. You just have to be who you are and be consistent. I had a girl yesterday say to me, when I first joined the club, I remember you in my old club coming over to say, welcome, how are you doing? She said, that meant so much to me. She now knows I'm a vicar. She now knows we have quite deep conversations now, because 15 years ago, I welcomed her into a club and I was just me. And we just never know what God's up to. But keep your eyes peeled and your ears open.
So was it a bolt out the blue, leaving that to set up your own coaching practice?
Well, yes, it sort of was, because I worked part-time for a while and I couldn't be in a senior position then, back in those days. So I was a troubleshooter in the business. And suddenly people were asking me to train them and teach them and show them how to do stuff. And coaching was coming over from America. So I did a coaching course. And eventually I thought, I think I could make a living at this. And you must promise, don't breathe a word to anyone. I never had a business plan. I mean, I just kind of did business. I knew how to run a business. I've done it for years. Sales. It's all about sales. So I had a coach in America, Judy. I've still got her. And a friend of mine said to me, I think you ought to have a job for 3 days a week. So I got a job for 3 days a week in a Christian, with some Christians as their sales director. Then he said, I think you need to meet so-and-so at Waverley Learning. I was like, oh, okay. So I've kind of just do as I'm told, went off, have a coffee. I was having a really bad day in my new business that really didn't exist as I was building my coaching practice. And I got a phone call that says, oh, could you do some work with us on such and such a company? It's going to be about 2 years work and we'll need you to do this, that and the other. So this huge piece of business turned up that I could do 2 days a week while I was building my coaching practice. And I have a prayer team. I've had a prayer team of 12, including Margaret Leggett, who died at 99, who was my first vicar's wife. She was on my prayer team, had 12 people who don't know each other, who I've known over the years, who pray for my business. They get a monthly one-pager. I've got 20 years worth of those sitting at home, sitting on my computer. And my business just built and grew from there. And it's the weirdest thing. When I go on holiday, I usually pick up business while I'm away. It's like God saying, don't panic. I've got it sorted. It'll be fine. And it is. It's just, I love it. It's where I learn from people like Richard, just you can't outgive God. Just give in. Let him get on with it and it'll be fine.
Brilliant.
So that's what I mean when I say to people, I'm a lazy Christian. I'm actually not lazy. I'm just prepared to give God my loaves and fish and say, mate, whatever you need, this is what I've got. And we go from there. So that whole work thing led to me starting to connect, thinking back, Mr. Clark and his faith, my work, what was the connection, what's going on? And I went to the Spring Harvest at Work Together in Harrogate. Mm-hmm. And I met a couple of people there, and one of them said, oh, you need to meet Mark Green. Well, marvellous Mark. I think you've done a podcast with him. I love Mark. He kick-started me as an associate speaker at the LICC. encouraging people in the pews that you don't have to be a vicar to be a Christian. You don't have to be a vicar to be useful to God. You know, you serve God wherever you are. And that LICC work has really given me a foundation for understanding that I don't need to be famous. I don't need to do all of those things. I just need to know and love the Lord. And he'll come alongside and produce more joy and fun than you can possibly hope for. And, you know, setting up the coaching practice, we've got, most people probably know Youth for Christ, but Greenwich Youth for Christ was local. And they said, well, you know, if you've got a spare afternoon, you can come over to the estate locally. I said, well, I'll do that. And so I used to help them with their youth group on a Thursday and a Friday afternoon. And separately, my church had a call. We had the estate was about the 11th most deprived estate in the country at the time. And they had a church army officer working on there. And it was a shop front. The church was a shop front. It was a dingy old place. But when Jesus was there, it came alive. And they said, we need people to make sandwiches for the tea. And I thought, well, I can do that. I can make cheese. I love a cheese and tomato sandwich. I even take the crusts off. So I went down and I made tea. And there was a lovely group, and we'd have tea, and then we'd have a Bible story and questions, and we'd pray and we'd sing. And Nick Russell was amazing from the church army. And we got into this, and there were gangs on the estate, and they were really naughty boys. And their job, as far as they were concerned, was to wreck whatever was near them. So my job was to stand outside the church with the door shut, because everyone was frightened of them, and be a bouncer. And they used to try and get in the front of the church, the back of the church. Anyway, one day I was chatting to a chap, and I was chatting over here, and I was really aware of something on the other side. I put my left hand out, and I couldn't see, and I caught a mug that had been lobbed at me. Just a cup of tea, been lobbed at me, and I caught it. And this lad went, blimey, do you see what she done? And I said, I caught this mug. And I thought, well, that was a God moment, because I didn't see it coming. Anyway, this young man, nobody had ever been able to engage with him. He had a very difficult background. And he and I hit it off like you wouldn't believe. He'd got a broken watch, and I said, look, I've got to go and get a new battery this week. Would you like me to get your watch fixed? So I had his watch fixed. He couldn't believe that someone was doing something for him and not asking for money and wanting something in return. Anyway, we all got on like a house on fire. And eventually one day I let them in, and I said, right, sit down there, shut up and eat your sandwiches. Nobody'd ever taken enough care of them. And there was this weird white middle-class woman telling them what to do. And we loved each other to bits. It was complete chaos a lot of the time, and it moved on to other work that we did with them. But I was in and out of prison with them. I was visiting them, their families, and there was just a connection. God was doing stuff. They could see Jesus in Nick, who was so lovely. And, you know, the cheese sandwiches were my version of the fish and the loaves. I can make cheese sandwiches. It's posh because I take the crusts off. But it was probably the most nutritious meal that most of them had. And it led on to teaching them on a Thursday afternoon. I mean, I was coaching separately and getting money that way. But the fun stuff was being on this estate where people had been abandoned. And we were the hope coming in to love them, show them the love of the Lord. They'd say, how much do you get paid for this? I say, I don't get paid for this because Jesus loves me. I love you. And that's how it works. And a lot of them had Christian heritage in their grandparents, and we kind of knew a lot of their history. So we knew there was something in there waiting to come alive. And I used to take them after Thursdays. Nick would teach them about something and I would teach cooking. So I'd have two kids in this inadequate kitchen with knives and all sorts. And we would cook the lunch for the boys who were in the church learning. And it was, you know, one of them went off to do cookery school and stuff because he was clearly good at cooking, but he was rubbish at classes. And that went on to be Thursday evenings with Youth for Christ in a separate building. and we had up to 60 kids. My friend Carolyn and I, we would cook food in this hideous kitchen that was half the size of my desk. And we had Muslims, Christians, no faith, and they're all together. And so we would pray and we would be with them and listen to them, engage with them. They knew we were Christians. And we, after our Thursday group, so the church army officer would teach them about engines and cars, because they could all drive at about 10 or 11 years old. They were all nicking cars. They all knew which the police cars were, they're unbranded police cars. So we'd have lunch and then we'd go for a little drive-by. So Nick and I would get our cars, and I had a lovely little Ford Puma, one of the originals. So we go out and I would be driving and I'd have my hand on the handbrake and one of the boys would change gear and I would do road safety. So we talk about the road signs and what was coming up, this, that and the other. And I don't know, you're probably familiar with this, but kids graph. They've got their little signature that they graph everywhere. So wherever you go, you know when Jordan's been there or Michael's been there because you recognise their graph. One of them had graphed on the back of my head thing in my car, and I knew who it was. And I said, "What are you doing, graphing in my car, you horrible child?" And he said, I didn't do it. And he denied it for 2-3 years. And then he was in a secure training centre. And this is the young lad I used to do Bible studies with. And I said, I so love it, because even though I can't see you, I've got your graph in the back of my car. And I'm reminded of you every time I put the seat forward. And he went, I'm really sorry, it was me. And we had that confessional, loving, Bible studying, whole of life moment where he understood that he could confess and I wasn't going to beat him. Yeah. And I witnessed another of the young lad who threw the mug at me. I witnessed him beat up a Youth for Christ youth worker who lived in my house at the time. And I was really worried, actually, because the police wanted me to give evidence against the young man, because I had to say what I'd seen, because I'm honest. And I was dreading telling him and his mother. And I was driving him down the road and I said, look, I'm really sorry, but I'm a witness for this. And I've had to make a statement to the police. And I thought he was going to fly off at the deep end, because that was one of the ways he could deal with things. And he just said, yeah, he said, I know you Christians, you've got to tell the truth, innit? Mm. And it was just like, he needn't have been that kind. He could have done the opposite, but actually he understood and I understood. It was a really tricky situation. And we've been to court lots of times together, and I've supported him since then. But the sad thing, and you say about youth groups, is that once a young person gets to 18, they're off. There's nothing to hold them. There's no, they have nothing. Mm. If they've been in care or anything, 18, bye. So a lot of these lads, we had no continuing time with them. They only have their memories, which were strong memories, and God has those memories to work with them on their lives after they've been let go by the system. Mm. There was a lovely girl that I used to, poor girl was an addict and her boyfriend was an addict, and she'd had a couple of children. One had been taken away by social services and the next one was about to be taken away, and I used to go and meet them with her, and it was all a really difficult situation, but I saw my job just to be there for her. And whilst I've worked mainly with boys, she was one of the few girls I'd worked with. And she went away to live with her family. So she moved away to get away from this bad situation in London. And she'd had both her children taken away from her. And it was just tragic. Broke all of our hearts. So I'm a few years later sitting in an office, and the phone rang. My mobile rang. Nobody ever phones me. She said, hello, it's so-and-so here. She said, I just want to let you know that I'm clean now, and I have been for 5 years, and I've come back to my family, and I'm in a stable relationship, and I'm about to have another child, and I'm in contact with the other children. And, we didn't talk about God much then, and we didn't before, but God was clearly doing something in her life. refreshing her, bringing her back to life and bringing her back to life in its fullness. And she phoned up to say thank you. She just phoned up. She didn't want anything. She just phoned up to say thank you. Beautiful. Like another time I was locking up at the drop-in. It was a bit of a dark and dingy back of the drop-in. And all of a sudden I was aware of a shadow in the darkness. And I thought, I wonder who that is. And it was one of the lads who, when we'd had a machete moment, we had somebody come into the youth group with a machete. And they're not, as you know, they're not very pleasant items to have around you. And it's quite scary. And the lads were all terrified. This young man said, don't worry, Daphne, I'll handle this. He stepped forward. He took a leadership moment and he talked the guy down with his machete. He talked him out of the drop-in away from danger and he got the machete off him. And that was one of the many leadership moments I saw with the men, the young men, if you let them. But this particular young man who diffused that situation had stayed behind about 6 or 7 months later. And he said, I'm in too deep, because he was in a difficult situation. I'm in too deep. I can't get out of it. But I just want to say thank you so much for what you've done. I just want to say thank you, because we just love those kids. And those stories of people experiencing love, albeit human love, with Christ at the centre, who knows where their life is going to move on to and how the Holy Spirit will wake them up in due course.
Yeah.
So I love those. I love those stories. Well, I'll have to stop because so many stories, but the great joy for me is they used to call us their Friday family. Do you know how that breaks? So on a Thursday, we had the youngsters and I would stand outside being a bouncer. That's when I had a bicycle chucked at me. One of the lads threw a bike at me and it missed. And he didn't intend it to hit me, I don't think, but I'd upset him somehow and I didn't know. And so on the Friday, I was quite frightened. He was a very dangerous young man. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I don't know what I did in the Friday club. And he said, you didn't let me come and see my mum in the club yesterday. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was your mum. Will you forgive me? Please, will you forgive me? And he went, yeah, I suppose. Anyway, I bought my driving licence stuff. Will you help me fill in my driving licence now? So I used to do a lot of that. But that whole thing of building trust and people seeing God when you can't see God. And I think one of the things that I've learned is if somebody has a gift, let them know. Because Nick said to me, you've got a real gift with those boys, Daphne. And I thought everyone loved badly behaved boys who run in and out of shops stealing and you go to court with them and all that stuff. I had no concept that other people were frightened of them. And if you roll the camera 15 years forward to about 6 months ago, I was walking along Blackheath Park and I do get a grump with God every now and then. And I was grumpy because I live on my own. I couldn't pray. I couldn't do anything. I'm going to Sainsbury's and I'm going to walk right along Blackheath Park and I'm going to walk the long route. I'm bound to see someone I know. I still didn't see anyone. I was still really grumpy with God. You're allowed to be. And even if you're evangelical. And all of a sudden, this 4x4 big black Mercedes with tinted windows comes rolling past. The window went down. Is that you, Daphne? And I said, yeah, who's that? I can't see you. It's Tolu. I'm stopping the car. I'm getting out. He came out and we had the most enormous hug. We hadn't seen each other for 15 years. And we talked about what he was up to. And I said, how's your relationship with the police? Oh, he said, I got fed up and annoying them. I'm running a business now. I said, are you paying your tax? Yeah. I've got an accountant. And I said, and how's your relationship with God? And he looked really guilty and said, oh, my son plays football on a Sunday for Millwall. I said, that's amazing. I said, and do that, encourage him. But remember, God will never let you go. No matter where you go, God will never let go of you. So we parted friends, and I'm the area dean's assistant in our local deanery, and I was doing an inspection at a church locally. And there somebody came in. I saw in my peripheral vision, somebody came in to pray, and I went over to say, "I'm really sorry. We're inspecting. We're doing this, that, and the other." And this voice went, "Hello, Daphne. What are you doing here?" And it was that young man I'd met 6 months earlier. He said, "I've just come in for some quiet time before I go to work." Oh,
lovely.
Can you imagine? My heart was, thank you, God. There was me having a grump, and look how you transform things. And I saw another of the boys the other day. He recognised my number plate on my car. Again, stop the van. If there are traffic jams in Blackheath, it's probably my fault. Stop the van, get out, have a hug, catch up. I used to do Bible studies with him when he was in a secure training centre. We used to do it on the phone. Don't you love God? I do. So what I'm saying is you only need to look. You don't have to look far to see God at work. You have to have your spirit engaged to just see what God is up to and join in. And no matter how dangerous it is, or not because I invite danger, but because I see God working so hard in difficult situations. And it just encourages me to keep going.
Amen. Well, from a very different context, when I work in Burundi, I would often think of safety is not the absence of danger, it's the presence of God. And God goes with us wherever we go. If we're listening to his voice, we can be disobedient and be foolish, but there's nothing like it. Hey, wonderful, inspired community. I just want to commend this initiative to you. The first time I had an encounter with street kids, it was very, very frightening. Basically, I got attacked and glass bottles were thrown at us as a group, and we legged it and we got police protection, and it was very traumatic. Afterwards, we met in the evening to discuss in the safety of the compound what had happened, and I wept and wept, and the team leader came over to me and put his arm around me and said this: "Pity cries and then goes away, but compassion stays." And that was so powerful to me. The rest of my life in Burundi particularly, which is a 28-year journey now so far, is about choosing to stay, choosing to engage, and to not give up on people. And what we do each Christmas is for all our staff, which is about 1,000 staff, give or take at the moment, because it's in flux, but 30 organizations we're backing, that we tried to give them about £40, which is about $50 each, for Christmas, so they can actually celebrate Christmas in terms of having some meat and some chocolates or sweets or candies or whatever, and maybe buy a dress for the missus, that sort of thing. So if you want to be involved in terms of our choosing to stay this Christmas, looking out for another family, could you do that at greatlakesoutreach.org/stay? I'll put that link in the description, greatlakesoutreach.org/stay, and maybe just bless one family or maybe a few families so that they can celebrate Christmas this year. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Now let's get back to the podcast. Now, Daphne, I just want to be sensitive here because it's a very delicate area, but I'd love it for you to share as little or as much on the pain of the brokenness of divorce and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's an easy thing to gloss over. So I mentioned going off for about 15 years, and I fell into bad company, as you do, and I fell away from being surrounded by Christians, and I was in difficult situations several times with male company, and eventually I married, and I can't believe I was so unwise, but I married in secret, and I didn't tell anyone for a year. That was the level of deceit that I'd been led into. And I think I probably broke my parents' hearts once or twice. But again, like God, they were always there. And we didn't know about it in those days, but there was a sort of coercive control element. And you don't know that that's happening. But having people who love you, including my brother, my sister, my parents, who are just gently there for you. I eventually found a way out. It took a long time. I was married for 9 years. And I was convinced any difficulties were my fault, and I did counselling and all the rest of it. And in the end, it became apparent that I had to extricate myself. And I had a great lawyer. I had a father who would pay me some money so I could pay for a lawyer. And I extricated myself. And sadly, my husband's family blacklisted me, and it took me years of prayer to get back to where my mother-in-law still now calls me her daughter-in-law. And I was determined that my son would not be kept away from them. So we've built family relationships to the point now that I get on really well with my brothers-in-law, my sister-in-law, grandma. And James, my son, has been always going over there on holiday. So there was something, it was painful, but I was working. So, and I had a great group of people around me, and divorce isn't the end. And it's flipping painful, and you think it's your fault. And there's all sorts of other dark stuff that had happened to me in my earlier life that I brought to the police 10 years ago, who were brilliant, to get it off my chest and to be understood and heard and believed. And it just, I think the thing that I've learned is when it's dark, when it feels dark, it doesn't matter how far away you are from the light, put the light on. Put the light on, tell someone, share your story. Because if you're with someone who doesn't judge you, like my therapist was, that whole story can be left behind. And those locusts that have eaten away at your life, just go. And the light, when you put the light switch on, you know, you can talk about your past, but you don't have to let it drag you down. And that's been a really valuable learning for me, because obviously as a vicar, you have people who, we all have broken lives. You know, all families are dysfunctional. Just read the Bible. And all families are dysfunctional. Some are more dysfunctional than others. But let's not judge each other. Let's be there for each other and allow the light to be switched on. Because everything in the dark, all that internet nonsense, all the news, all the false this, that and the other, forget it. Put the light on and allow your past to be your past and not hang around your neck forever.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because that will minister to a number of people. We want to be very clear that, no one wants a divorce, and there's a lot of pain and brokenness in the world, and no one becomes a second-class citizen in that process. There is redemption, there's forgiveness, there's restoration. As you say, God can restore the years the locusts have eaten in manifold ways as we come to him. So where did the overlap, or is there still an overlap between your coaching and being a vicar? Are you part of a team, or what does that look like? Yeah.
So, I did my training about 10 years ago, and I'm what's called a self-supporting minister. So the church paid for my training, and I give my time as a vicar. So I'm an assistant minister at a church. I think I probably drive the vicar mad, and I think he probably drives me mad, but God's put us together and we work quite well as a team. And I'm still a coach. But even then, oh my days, I forgot to even mention this. Even then, about when I was first a coach, I had a lovely client, and she knew I never tell people I'm a Christian. They sort of discover, how it goes. And she said, I'm getting married. I wonder if you can help me with my readings. Dad wants this, that, and the other. So I helped her with her Bible readings, and she got married, and they became Christians later. They loved the course that they were sent on. And then I have another current client who I didn't know, and I'm really careful. I cannot push my faith. I cannot. It's an abuse of power. But he has a client in the Far East who's a Christian. He has a client in Scotland, a supplier in Scotland who's a Christian, and they've both been talking to him about, God and this, that, and the other. And one of them said, why don't you listen to the Alpha Bible in a year? And he's mentioned it to me a few times, and I'm really laid back. The other day he sent in his questions before coaching, and it said, I've achieved this, I've done that, blah, blah, blah. When we finished, I've got a question about the Old Testament, please. so we ended, we go off piste and we come back. But, my work is a complete overlap. And I always think about that Naaman's servant girl who just got on with her job. She did an amazing job and people saw what was going on. And my brother who came back to Christ because he said, I saw how you were going through a divorce 30 years ago. He said, and I've come back to Christ now. I never said a word to him. I never said a thing. So I love my coaching practice, but I talk about both. And I love the Bible and I love opening up the Bible to people and joining the dots on a Sunday. And I go to different churches because we've got lots of vacancies. And you join the dots and they're like, oh yeah, I'd never really thought about my work like that. So a job of a vicar, yes, it's to nurture and the shepherd your sheep that you have. But for my money, it's about empowering people who are in the pews and in their workplaces to know and love the Lord and to understand how much God really cares about where they are.
Hey folks, if you want an extra dose of inspiration in your inbox, check out the Choose Life email devotional. You can choose either to get a daily or a weekly email which will spur you on your faith journey. And we've been running this for the past few years and we're going to continue into the next year. So go to chooselife.org.uk. The link will be in the description and sign up and choose life in 2026. That's chooselife.org.uk. And have a cracking 2026 indeed. Now let's get back to the podcast. So Daphne, as we draw things to a close, what would be your last word to us?
My last word would be about prayer. We all lead an inadequate prayer life. So please don't feel that people who are vicars spend their whole day praying. Well, you can do as you walk around. But my prayer team has been the most invaluable group of people that I think my business could not manage without them. I tell them regularly, have a prayer team. Wherever you work, whatever you do, it's confidential. My group didn't know until this year who they all were. And they get a 1 page of A4 that says the dates I'm coaching, no names, the dates I'm coaching, the dates I'm preaching, the things I'm up to, the holidays I'm on. And I know that one of them prays for me every Friday. I know that 2 of them pray for me pretty much every day. And I know that some email me back and say, I wonder if this is happening, or I wonder if this is happening. And have a prayer team that will support you on the days that you know about it and the days you don't know about it. It's not a big deal, and just keep it really simple. And there's only 3 people in my church who are in my prayer team. The rest are in churches I've been to or retired people. A lot of retired people feel redundant and their prayer time is so valuable now. And so get yourself a prayer team. And my prayer team have only had 1 afternoon tea in 20 years. So you don't have to entertain them all the time, but do surround yourself with prayer. I think that Destiny Fair was prayer. The lads on the estate was all about prayer. Lift it to God and see what God's going to do. Because man alive, it's going to be fun and it's going to be joyous and it's going to be painful and it's going to hurt and all of those things. But when God is present, you can cope with it, particularly when you've got your beautiful prayer team who are supporting you.
Amen. Well, I've certainly got mine, and I'm so grateful for them. And I actually believe I'm still alive because of people's prayers. I think of other people dying on the road in Burundi and me getting through and just thinking, wow, I'm not better than them, but there is a protection here going on. And obviously that's an extreme example, but prayer is powerful, people. Get people behind you. We all need to have each other's back. So I've journeyed with my best mate Dirk. We've we prayed for each other in a family every Wednesday for the last 29 years or whatever, and it's it's really important. Yeah, it's crucial. Listen,
and I think find out the way that you pray as well. So the way that you pray won't be the way that I pray. Work out what works for you. I think is really important. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I love you talking about Youth for Christ, which is a great organisation. Their work is so important, and we've got Youth for Christ out in Burundi with support. It's one of the strongest movements out there in Africa, doing spectacular stuff in schools. It's discouraging to think that so many youth clubs are closing in the nation right now, and it's so important to get alongside people. And I love it that in your story, it's 15 years later. It's long-term fruit, isn't it? You don't necessarily see it in the moment, but later on you meet these people and they've lifted themselves out of the brokenness, or hopefully with God's help, and going on with God. It's beautiful. Well, listen, Daphne, Clifton, thanks for your time. God bless you, sister.
Thank you. God bless you too. And thank you for all that you're doing to encourage us. It's great.
Wonderful. Folks, give us a great review, please, on Spotify, iTunes. I want to thank Adam Thomas Deere for editing, Mike Sandman for mixing. Next week, we've got a very different story. All these stories are so totally different, aren't they? But in the meantime, you go for it. Go for glory. God bless you. Have a good week, and toodaloo.